Good afternoon. I do hope everyone is doing well. I'm Dr. Ronnie Christian, Deputy Director, Interim Director for the City of Winston-Salem Human Relations, DEI Department. We want to go ahead and get started for today. And with that said, I would like to ask our esteemed mayor to come forward, please.
Good morning. Yeah, it still is morning. Good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure for me to be at this event every year, and I want to thank the panelists here. I looked at the program. It's like a lot of meaty items there that's going to be discussed. Thank you for being here, and thank all of you for being here as we gather to remind ourselves and talk about the whole issue of fair housing, Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, and throughout the region there. Just was looking at the panel items that Ms. George is going to be moderating, the fair housing, source of income, the accessory dwellings that we've dealt with, reasonable accommodations and rental housing, and the effect of inflation, which we all know the impact of that. So as you know, the city has been very committed and continues to be committed to providing affordable housing in our community because we've got a huge need. I guess it was 4 years ago, Councilmember McIntosh, that we had the study that showed we needed around 16,000 new units in the next 10 years or so. We've made some progress. In the last 2 years, the city has taken action with other developers. We've approved about 1,500 units, but that's about 10% of what we need. And guess what? We're about out of money that we set aside. I asked the city council to set aside $30 million, which they did. But most of that has been used in that first 1,500. So we're working right now on some ideas to create our own local housing trust fund and some other sources there. But fair housing is so important. As we create our units, we've got to make sure that individuals have the opportunities to get those units and to be treated fairly. And it's strong work, important work. I volunteer with a group called A Bed in the Book, where we actually build beds and take them to kids who are sleeping on the floor. And it's pretty amazing. We've done about 700 units over the past 4 years. And as I go in and to help deliver those beds, you really see some interesting cases there, and you can see the need for the fair housing work. And so thank you all for being here, and thank the panel again for doing this, and I hope you have a very productive session. Thank you, Ryan.
At this time, we're going to hear from Mr. Robert Leake III, our chairperson for the Human Relations Commission.
Good afternoon. All right, we can do better. This is the 18th annual Fair Housing. Good afternoon. All right, thank you all so much. Yes, we're gonna serve lunch in a minute. So it was April 11, 1968. President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, which included the FHA. The law made discrimination in the financing, sale, or rental of housing illegal. As well, the Fair Housing Act protects people from discrimination when they are renting or buying home or getting a mortgage, seeking housing assistance, or engaging in other housing-related activities. And we also know from that law that President Lyndon B. Johnson signed in 1968 was incorporated within the Civil Rights Act with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as well. And so we are excited that we can celebrate again this year the 18th annual of the Fair Housing Affordable Summit here in Winston-Salem. So I hope today that you will gain some information to take back to your constituents, but also to your employers as well, and share the information in regards to fair housing information to our citizens here in Winston-Salem also your colleagues as well. I do at this time want to recognize some committee members who have worked alongside with me to put this program together. And we meet beginning every year in January, and we conclude in April of every year. And so I want to recognize those committee members at this time. If you are a committee member of the Fair Housing Horizon Committee, Fair Housing Horizon Committee, please, New Horizon, that's right, New Horizon, I gotta get it right, New Horizon Fair Housing Committee, please stand this time. Thank you. I had to get it right. I forgot we're going live. The second thing is I want to also recognize our commissioners of the Human Relations Commission. If you all could please stand as well. Thank you. Commissioner McKinney and Vice Chair Travis. And we also want to thank our elected officials also for coming as well. Councilmember Jeff McIntosh as well. And our Assistant City Manager, Ms. Patrice Toney. Thank you. Come on, stand up, stand up. Thank you so much. Enjoy today's luncheon. Oh, wait a minute, I forgot one more thing. I also want to recognize our Human Relations DEI staff as well. So come on, y'all gotta stand, let's stand. I'm gonna let you stand now. I want to thank Dr. Rodney Christian as well. Thank you so much.
So again, good afternoon. And again, I'm Dr. Ronnie Christian, the Interim Director for the Human Relations DEI Department. And on behalf of the City Manager, Mr. Patrick Pate, our Director, Ms. Wanda Allen Aberhai, again, I want to extend a very warm welcome to the 18th Annual Fair Housing Summit. In addition, I want to thank our sponsors for their financial contributions, because we know without the money, there is no honey, right? So in addition, we want to, again, thank our financial sponsors for their contributions. Those being Piedmont Federal Savings Bank, the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem, the City of Winston-Salem Neighborhood Services Department, Forsyth County Community and Economic Development Department, Winston-Salem Regional Association of Realtors, Power Up, again, the City of Winston-Salem, Financial Pathways of the Piedmont, and HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Again, welcome and thank you to our wonderful sponsors. And at this time, we're going to move into the main portion of this, which is lunch, right? So we're going to go ahead and move forward with our lunch. So if you will, please help yourselves and move over to the buffet table to get your lunch. May I have your attention? So at this time, as I mentioned, we have a number of financial sponsors who are here with us today. At this time, we do want to allow a representative from Piedmont Federal Savings and Bank to come forward and speak for a nice whole minute.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Hey, I get the happiest crowd of the day. Everybody has their lunch. I see all these smiles on their faces. This feels good. Feels good. So, my name is Cameron Berry. I'm with Piedmont Federal Bank. And at Piedmont Federal, we have essentials or core values. We have 26 of them. I'm not going to go through them all today, but we have 26 of them. One of them is collaborate always. And that one really stuck out to me for today's event, because if you just look around the room, you see all the different organizations that came together to make this event happen, and all the organizations and collaboration that it takes to make, fair housing work. So I thought that fit this event perfectly. Speaking of collaboration, Piedmont Federal, we have recently collaborated with other mutual banks to begin offering secondary market loans. So for 120 years, we were a portfolio lender, which basically means that we were stuck to limited products. So now, as a lender, it feels good to have more tools in your toolbox and make more things work for the community. So the secondary market allows us to work with people with low to moderate income. It allows us to have lower interest rates for those clients as well. And it just gives us more flexibility on the mortgage side. And lastly, I just want to thank everyone for coming out today. I hope you all enjoyed today's event. And Piedmont Federal has been here and will continue to be here. Thanks for your time.
At this time, can we have the representative from Forsyth County Community and Economic Development, please?
So I checked my watch before I came up here, so I got this right. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's enjoying their lunch. My name is Kyle Haney. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director for Forsyth County. They recognize me from last year sitting in the hot seat over here as the moderator. You got someone way better than me this year. So, I do bring greetings from the county commissioners and Forsyth County. We are a proud sponsor of the Fair Housing Summit. I really believe in this mission, and so appreciative of all the work that the city and all the partners in the fair housing and affordable housing space are doing in this community. I see many of the organizations that we work with through to do our down payment assistance, our first-time homebuyers program, and even some of the affordable housing development with the Peters Creek, the flats at Peters Creek recently. It does take a whole community. I'm glad that we are all here together and look forward to continuing to work together. Thanks so much.
And at this time, we're going to ask Ms. Michelle Mitchell, Director of Mortgage Banking and Piedmont Federal Bank, to come forward, please.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm like Cameron. It's so good to be up here when everybody's eating and not paying attention to me. So you just keep looking at your plates. Eat. I'll just sit up here and look pretty, okay? I was actually thinking about, last night, I was thinking about how long I had been on this committee, and I remember Robert Sanders asked me to take over for him. He was with Piedmont for many, many years. And I remember him saying to me, this is serious, Michelle. You have to take this committee seriously. You got to be there. You got to be present. And he was right. This committee means everything to me. I've been on it a long time, and I thoroughly enjoy it. And it has just been a great honor to be here and to present for you today. Again, I'm Michelle Mitchell. I'm the Director of Mortgage Banking at Piedmont Federal Bank, and I am super excited to present this award. It is truly an honor to be part of the New Horizons Fair Housing Committee and to participate in the selection process for the Breaking Barriers Award. Presenting this award is a special moment for me, knowing the impact on promoting fair housing opportunities within our city. I am delighted to announce that this year's Breaking Barriers Award goes to Whole Man Ministries. Their dedication to holistic development, their collaborative spirit, and their ongoing efforts to provide housing to veterans in our community truly exemplify the essence of this award. Whole Man Ministries' commitment to addressing the housing needs of our veteran heroes is commendable. By creating housing solutions tailored to veterans, they are actively combating housing discrimination and ensuring that this underserved population has access to safe and stable housing. Their initiative not only addresses immediate housing needs, but also contributes to long-term stability and well-being. I want to take this moment to congratulate Pastor Barry Washington and the entire team at Whole Man Ministries for their outstanding work and for making a positive difference in our community, one life at a time. This recognition is well-deserved, and I am so proud of to celebrate their achievements with you all today.
My name is Barry Washington. I am the Bishop of Whole Man Ministries. Well, Whole Man Ministries deal with the whole man, spirit, soul, and body. A lot of people see that name, Whole Man Ministries. And Whole Man Ministry is so much more. We are a church. We are an organization, a nonprofit. We are a food pantry. We provide housing, some training, counseling, spiritual guidance. We are so many different things. One of our core values is to look out for the veterans. You know, we were going down to Samaritan Ministry, volunteering, doing the devotions, and what we discovered was that there were a whole lot of homeless, and particularly veterans. And we were like, we can't allow that. You know, you just can't allow that many veterans to be homeless and do nothing about it. So we set out almost 12 years ago to start providing housing for homeless veterans. And we've been fortunate and been able to provide at least about 35 homes for those who were homeless.
But this year, it's going to be a young man's room. In here, it's already been furnished.
So it's taken us almost a year to renovate this project. And after a year of renovation and being able to bring a person who's essentially is homeless and bring them in, wow. Not only do they feel a gratitude and appreciation, overwhelmed, I'm feeling the same way. I'm like, wow, this is wonderful that we're able to make a lasting impact on a person's life that hopefully will go on and make a lasting impact on the lives of his family members and those in the community. When we open the door for a new veteran, it is so exciting. You feel emotional because you know that you're making a big difference in this person's life. So when that veteran walks in there, really he has a home, he has food, he has furniture, appliances, you know, washer, dryer, everything. So I'm excited, and there's a sense of accomplishment that I made a difference in somebody's life. To be recognized and say, look, we see the work that Whole Man Ministry is doing, and we want to recognize it. We are honored. We are honored. We are humble to receive such a prestigious award. And what better award than breaking down barriers to house those that need it the most.
What an incredible organization. We're going to have words now from Pastor Barry Washington.
Well, thank you. What a blessing to be on this part of helping someone in need. We'd like to thank the committee, New Horizons, I think it's New Horizons Fair Housing Committee, and also the commission, the Fair Housing Commission that selected us. We are grateful to be in this position. We started out, my wife and I certainly want to thank her, and Whole Man Ministries. We started out 12 years ago. We visited a homeless shelter, and we realized that there were several homeless veterans there. To our surprise, it wasn't because they were inapt or they were irresponsible. It was a life crisis, little things that happened that changed their lives. And so we set out to make a difference. And today, we are so honored to receive Breaking Barriers Award, breaking down the barriers for fair housing for so many that are going through the day. And I'm sure you guys are aware that housing is tough. And last but not least, this assignment that we're presently working on now is one house, 3 apartments that we're going to change the lives of about 17 individuals with one spot. That alone is amazing. Thank you so much for recognizing the work that we have done here today. A lot of times your head is down, you're grinding, you're doing the work, but for someone to pause the city of Winston-Salem and say, look, we see what you're doing, we appreciate it, and we want to honor you with this prestigious award. Thank you so much.
If we can, let's give our awardee another round of applause. At this time, I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator for today, Mrs. Phyllis Caldwell-George. Phyllis serves as the president and CEO of Financial Pathways of the Piedmont. She joined the agency in 1998 as a financial counselor, and within a year's time, she became the housing director. In that role, she oversaw the agency's financial management, debt counseling, and housing programs, as well as the Center for Home Ownership, a nationally recognized pre-home ownership education program. Phyllis recently celebrated 25 years with the organization. Let's give her a big round of applause for that. She is a passionate advocate of asset building for low to moderate income households, a community leader, a speaker, an educator, a wife, a best friend. Can I get an amen? No. Phyllis holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Salem College in the area of not-for-profit management, and a plethora of certifications and association memberships, including a 2009 graduate from Leadership Winston-Salem. With all of that said, our moderator for today, Mrs. Phyllis Caldwell-George.
Let me get my glasses on because, you know, when you been with the agency for 25 years, your vision goes a little bit. So welcome again. Thank you all for being here. We have a group of expert panelists that will be providing us great information today. If you have a copy of the agenda, you should have a brief bio about each one of our panelists, but I'm going to take the time to be able to go down the aisle and allow them to introduce themselves and also the organization that they are with. So we will start with Sandra.
Good afternoon. I am Sandra Gaskell. I head risk and compliance at Piedmont Federal Savings Bank.
Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Fox. I'm the supervising attorney for housing for the Winston-Salem Office of Legal Aid.
I'm Neil Parnell. I'm in retail banking with Piedmont Federal Bank.
Good afternoon. Marlon Wilkins with TAW Group. I am the Director of Business and Community Development.
Good afternoon. Dr. Russ Smith, Professor of Geography at Winston-Salem State University.
Thank you all. And so today we're going to be talking about accessory dwelling units. We're going to be talking about fair lending and source of income, also reasonable accommodation in rental housing, as well as inflation as a barrier to rent and purchasing housing. So let us get started. I'd like to start with Sandra. Can you talk about what the parameters are in place for lenders and bankers to mitigate the possibility of lending discrimination?
If you work in a bank,
Is your mic on?
can you hear me now? Okay. If you work in a bank, if any of you are bankers here, you know that our industry is very highly regulated, and one of the regulations that we have to adhere to is fair lending. So what we have to put in place are our fair lending policies, and these are policies that explicitly prohibit discrimination based on protected classes such as race, color, sex, age, etc. We do ongoing training and education, and when I say ongoing, it is every day, every year, just to reinforce the basics of fair lending. I'm also going to throw in there that it's a culture. If you're, our bank, we strive to be inclusive, and what we want to do on the inside, we want to project on the outside to our community. We have underwriting criteria, which is really the qualifications to obtain a loan. We need to use objective, standardized criteria and apply it consistently to all applicants. Sometimes applicants fall out of those standards, so offering special purpose credit programs to incorporate them into home ownership is important to us. Compliance and monitoring. So this is where the party pooper comes to the party because there are laws we have to adhere to, and in compliance, I need to make sure that we are adhering to laws. Monitoring and auditing our programs and policies to detect any fair lending discrimination. We incorporate review of lending practices, loan files, and statistical analysis. We love data. We love to collect data. If you've ever done an application, we collect a lot of data and we use it. Diverse outreach and marketing. We encourage applications from a broad range of applicants, and we partner with our community organizations. Financial Pathways has been a great partner for us. Participate in community events. This is to raise awareness of, what are the needs in our community. It's important to be involved as a community bank in the community. Fair credit reporting. This is if you have a loan with us that, your histories are reported to the credit bureaus accurately. These affect our credit scores, and so we're also obligated to resolve any inaccuracies there. And finally, it's compliance with all our fair lending laws. There is the Fair Housing Act, Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and also the Community Reinvestment Act that make up our fair lending laws.
Thank you, Sandra. Moving on to Matthew, can you define what is meant by a reasonable accommodation within the meaning of the fair housing laws?
So a reasonable accommodation is essentially a request from a disabled tenant for an exception to a normal rule in a rental housing situation. So for example, a tenant who is disabled cannot take stairs due to mobility issues. They would be able to request to a landlord to ask for a first floor unit outside of the normal policy of, say, first come, first serve, or a general rule that people get whatever apartment they get. So that would be a request they could make, and generally landlords would have to consider that request, and if they deny it, they have to come up with specific reasons to do so in their denial. Another example of a request would be a disability animal or a emotional support animal where a tenant has a medically prescribed emotional support animal or seeing eye dog, for example, and there is a no pet policy at the apartment that they are living at. They would be able to go to that landlord and say that I need an exception to the current rule for no pets due to a medical reason. And generally that needs to be granted, or there needs to be extremely compelling reasons why it's not granted. Generally, when it comes to most disabilities, the landlord's going to have to prove a pretty high burden to explain why they are unwilling to allow this accommodation.
Thank you. Moving on to Neil Parnell. Can you talk to us about how how may inflation be used as a means of discriminating against potential home buyers and renters?
Thank you, Phyllis. I would start by saying I'm thankful I'm in banking and not an economist. I know from our panel discussion last year, we felt like that interest rates would potentially start to decline in 2024, and we've not seen that trend. We continue to see the increase in inflationary pressure in everything that we do from a daily basis. I mean, when we go to the gas pump, when we go to the grocery store, we're feeling the increased cost of goods. It's decreasing our discretionary income as consumers, and it makes it very difficult to continue to save money for potentially down payments, but also from investors. When we look at the rental market, it costs more for investors to purchase properties and to create more rental units, which is also increasing those rental costs. So the continued increase in inflationary pressure is increasing the home values, and we're not seeing any of that change. So it continues to be a challenge.
Thank you. So I'm going to move to Marlon Wilkins to talk about accessory dwelling units, which is, we talk about not having enough housing in our community, and this may be a way to be able to increase housing stock or to be able to assist those that may have grandparents or mothers or whoever that we can increase housing stock that way. So tell us, Marlon, what is an ADU and what would qualify as one?
Sure, thank you. So ADUs are small secondary dwellings units located on the same property as a primary structure, which means your primary house. ADUs can be built to pretty much help with the housing shortage. We're talking about another unit that can be used for a rental property. It can also be used as a granny flat, is what we normally call them. ADUs have existed in Winston-Salem, if I'm not mistaken, since the 1930s. Winston-Salem has done a great job of going in on the zoning and regulations and making good strides to allow us to now focus on this as an income structure as well. ADUs can be allowed to, again, be used as rental property, which can be placed in neighborhoods that have been primarily disadvantaged. They can be used as, again, allowing our seniors to age in place, which is something that most thriving neighborhoods are already allowed to do.
Thank you, Marlon. While we have your attention, I'll go ahead and ask my next question and we'll come back down. So how affordable are ADUs and how easy are they to finance and actually to develop?
Sure. So with ADUs, affordability is always a problem, I guess is the way I would always put it. What's affordable to me may not be affordable to you. So I will say that I would always tell people, when you get ready to do an ADU, you're going to have to follow any process that you would normally follow with the city. So you're definitely going to need an architect. You're going to need plan sets. You're going to need for these things to be approved. So those things do incur costs. So again, there are costs associated, but when you look at the benefit of just hypothetically building a unit behind your home that's going to allow you to increase your income by $1,000, then it kind of becomes more of a trade-off.
Thank you. I know that with our Center for Homeownership, we have a number of clients that we assist and help them in preparing for homeownership. And when we don't have enough housing stock, it definitely impacts their affordability. But even more when interest rates are trending upward, it impacts their affordability even more. And so, Neil, can you tell us what are the trends that indicate how current rates affect the various legally protected classes of persons?
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge again, Phyllis, especially when you consider prior to 2024, even early 2023, for the last 14 years, we've been in a very low interest rate environment, and rates have been below 4% for quite some time, which created a lot of consistency in those costs and monthly housing expenses. And as we continue to see rates rise and a lot of the investment properties that are coming up for changing of rates and refinances, those costs are going up, which are causing the monthly housings to increase, which are causing adverse impacts, which is very difficult and creates more and more challenging situations.
Thank you. Going back to reasonable accommodations, how are service animals and/or emotional support animals to be regarded as a reasonable accommodation?
So generally, if you have a letter from a medical professional or usually a doctor stating that the emotional support animal is necessary or even prescribed by them, generally it is to be upheld as a necessary medical situation. So landlords are generally not able to dismiss it as simply it's just a pet that they're disguising as a medical need. And under the general guidelines for North Carolina, emotional support animals are not pets. So even though they look similar to pets, they're not. And if a landlord has a no pet policy, it has to be overturned in this specific case if we do have a medical professional who has prescribed it.
Thank you. So, Sandra, what is source of income discrimination, and what are some examples of that?
Source of income discrimination occurs when you are discriminated based on a lawful source of income to obtain housing. Some examples are the housing choice vouchers or any other housing subsidy programs, Social Security, alimony, child support, veterans benefits, etc. Source of income is not a protected class under our Fair Housing Act, while we do have protections for race, color, religion, etc. But this discrimination results in a disparate impact as statistically women and people of color are most affected by this. And why does this happen? Perception that participation in this program has too many regulatory burdens, rents above fair market value, unfavorable views on people that hold these vouchers, quote unquote, they are not good tenants. And while there are state and local policies to prevent this, again, it is not protected at the federal level. In my research, I found in June of 2022, the city of Winston-Salem has the Housing Justice Act, which would prevent discrimination based on sources of income. So kudos to Winston-Salem.
And so, can you talk about how appraisals perhaps impact fair lending?
Yep, so appraisals play a crucial role in fair lending because they are going to influence a loan approval decision, the terms of your loan, and access to credit. And so an appraisal is really a property valuation. And the outcome of an appraisal really determines the value of that property, which in turn affect really how much financing you can obtain. If appraisals undervalue properties in minority or low-income areas, it can result in disparities in lending, and this is where we have appraisal bias or discrimination, which is really a hot-button topic for us bankers. In the loan approval process, an appraisal allows a bank really to assess the risk associated with this property and obtaining a mortgage. And if an appraisal results in lower property values in certain neighborhoods, lenders would be less inclined to approve loans. This leads to reduced access to credit. It also affects terms. If this property is deemed risky, you may be required to put more money down for a down payment, or you may be charged a higher interest rate, which affects, the affordability of housing. And then just really making sure lenders and our appraisers comply to assessing a property in a fair and unbiased manner. And there's a lot of focus on that. A lot of wording in appraisals can be very negative. So I'll just touch a few things on technology, kind of the good and the bad. You can use software to run appraisal through to just kind of find out these key bias words and, correct that. On the other side, we have an automated valuation model which will produce an appraisal, but that model depends on prior data. And so if you have undervalued properties, that automated appraisal or valuation will continue to be undervalued.
Very interesting. So going back to reasonable accommodation, Matthew, can you talk about what animals are considered emotional support animals by HUD standards and guidelines?
So it's generally cats and dogs. Even though a doctor's prescription or letter will be extremely helpful, if you can talk a doctor into getting an emotional support alligator, it's going to be a lot more difficult to justify than a dog. So it's also not a legal decision that the doctor's making there. I mean, if you're in court and we're having to litigate, again, a ludicrous animal for an emotional support animal, it's going to make it a lot more difficult. So generally cats and dogs.
Thank you. So, Neil, I'm going to ask for you to get out your crystal ball. I know this is a lot to ask, but just in your opinion, when could potential buyers and renters actually see some type of relief from inflationary rates and rental cost?
I'm gonna utilize some resources that Winston's been able to provide this week. We were blessed to have the Federal Reserve Chair Tom Barkin here yesterday in Winston and did a presentation on the second floor here. And the forecast from, as we discussed earlier, the forecast from 2023 was that we would start to see some reductions in interest rates around this time this year, and those forecasts have started to decline. It did not, of course, give us any guarantees, but they're alluding to maybe more stable rates through the remaining part of this year. We're hopeful that we still may see a rate reduction by the end of 24, but I feel certain that we'll start to see some in 2025. We've got to get some of this inflationary costs and inflationary pressure out of the economy, which will be able to cause some of those reductions and increase the affordability of homes. You're starting to see, when you look at the cost of new construction, you're starting to see the lumber costs come back down, but the actual input, a lot of the input costs are still increased according to pre-COVID levels. So there's still a lot of challenges and overall costs, and I'm hopeful for the rate environment ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many things that go into the cost of affordability. So going back to Marlon, so, with ADUs, how may ADUs actually affect generational wealth for low to moderate income individuals?
Sure. So let me give you a better look of what an ADU looks like. In some neighborhoods, you have old garages behind the house. In some neighborhoods, you have pool houses. In some neighborhoods, you just have an old abandoned shed behind the house, right? All of those can be considered an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit. They can be converted into livable space. So with that being said, how does that help with generational wealth? Again, that plays into the aging in place. We have an aging population, and that population typically, as it gets older, wants to either move out of the home, the existing home, or have to downsize. Primarily because normally the kids don't want to move back or just can't afford to. So the ADU allows two things. It allows for either the parent to remain in the home, the primary home, and rent out the secondary home behind to maybe the kids, or vice versa. Allow the developing family to take the front unit and allow the parent to move into the back. But what that does is it allows, again, for the aging in place, it also allows for that generational wealth to be stable as well, because it's in place. It just continues to grow from there.
Very good. And, how would one become an ADU landlord?
Sure. So again, you take a look at your property and you assess what you already have there. If you do not have an accessory dwelling unit, again, then you would have to follow all of the zoning and regulations that are in place. Our company, which is TAH, we build permanent, temporary, affordable housing, but we specialize in sustainable housing. For us, that's a little different. Everything that we build, we're already building to be 2030 and 2035 compliant. So everything that we build has an energy efficient component, meaning solar, right? So for us, that's a little different. We also incorporate that into our ADU bills. That also allows us to cut costs, not only on the housing issue, But when we start talking about sustainability and affordability, we also have to start looking at what does that look like after the person can afford the home, right? He still has to pay power bill and those type of things. Our company is kind of future forward. We are developing not only, we build with sustainable materials, meaning containers as a building material. We also do solar, and we also are developing technology to grow inside of those containers. So we will be one of the only companies around that can deliver housing, power, and food in one unit.
Fascinating. So we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about reasonable accommodations. And so, Matthew, can you tell us, what are some of the statewide trends with disability cases in fair housing?
So generally, it's being more accepted. The North Carolina School of Government gives guidance to magistrates as well as judges on general cases that they're likely to see, and their opinions on this have been more broad recently. Again, they have declared that emotional support animals are not pets, and therefore no pet policies do not apply to them. And it's generally being more accepted as to previously. If you have a disability animal or a emotional support animal or service animal, it's just more than likely you're not going to run into as many problems as you perhaps used to.
So as a HUD-approved housing counseling agency, we talk a lot about CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act. It is oftentimes ways that we are able to make connections and engage with our financial institutions. We like for it to be a meaningful relationship. But let's talk about ways that CRA ensures that needs of marginalized communities are met in banking and lending.
So Community Reinvestment Act, it's almost what it says. It's a reinvestment into the community. And that's what community banks do. We are looked at our performance in the community by our regulators. This is part of our fair lending program, and it was really enacted to encourage banks to meet the credit needs in the community we serve, access to affordable credit for home ownership and small businesses, focusing on minority or women-owned businesses and other financial needs. One thing I'd like to point out about accountability and transparency with the Community Reinvestment Act is that every bank is required to have a public file. That public file is free upon request. It's also sometimes found on a bank's website. But that contains data about how well we are meeting the needs of our community. There's reports about the bank's lending. There's reports from our regulators about how well they think we're doing. So it does contain a lot of information. And then the important thing here is, again, it's reinvestment, so it's partnership with our community organizations, working together to target needs in the community around housing, economic and social challenges, and trying to reduce those disparities, especially in homeownership, small business development, and really bringing together low, moderate, and more affluent areas of our community.
Thank you so much, Sandra, Matthew, Neil, and Marlon. This has been some great information. At this point in time, we want to open up to see if anyone has any questions for our panelists. If you do, I think that we have a few microphones, and if you would just stand up and let us know if you have any further questions.
I have a question for Mrs. Smith. Can you talk a little bit more about your research that you're doing that you love to have?
Sure, and I'm going to be talking in a little bit, but most of the research is around spatial injustice. So looking at, oh, sorry, I forgot it was a microphone here. Hey, thanks for the question. That's a lot better. You guys can hear now. So my research focuses on spatial injustice, geographic inequalities, what's the causes of those historically and even through today. So in a little bit, I'm going to present a project that we're introducing in the community that's going to be looking at the history in Forsyth County of using deed restrictions and racial covenants for exclusionary purposes related to housing, which I think this group knows a lot about and might want to participate. Some other research I've done is on local government boundary change. Most of it's urban geography related. Thanks for the question. Nice to talk to everybody.
We're going to hear a lot more from you in just a few minutes. Are there any other questions? Okay, Dr. Seals in the back.
I'm coming.
We hear how you're protecting the institution through trainings, through targeted outreach and CRA, but how about the idea of disparate impact, that some of these colorblind processes may still create discrimination at a systems level or a community level?
Are we good? Thank you. So disparate impact is really where you're going to put something in place and it has an unintended consequence. So, for example, if you're going to lend on credit scores, you are going to inadvertently impact anybody else that has a lower credit score. When we get together at the bank, when we look at policies and procedures, especially around lending, we talk about fair lending all the time. We are playing the devil's advocate. Neil can probably attest to this, that, he's in charge of lending, Michelle here is in charge of the products, and so we have some pretty spirited discussions around the unintended consequences. You want to do this, but I want you to think about, what this may have effect on. Alimony is one that we've talked about. So, statistically, women do get alimony or child support. And so if you have a policy of, around maybe not accepting it or something around alimony, then you're inadvertently just kind of excluding a class of people that you really didn't intend to.
Thank you. Any other questions? I do have one for Marlon. Like, what are some of the best practices across North Carolina regarding ADUs?
So basically what we're seeing is exactly the model that I'm discussing is using ADUs to increase the housing stock. Not so much for rental income, but just really having a way of increasing density without actually having to go and purchase new property. That's the biggest key. But what we're seeing nationally is that more states are backing the ADU policy. I think New York and California are kind of leading the way. They actually have grants to assist people in building ADUs. I think New York is $250,000 to $500,000 just to build an ADU. So that's kind of where everything is headed.
Thank you. If there are no further questions from my panelists, I want to thank you all for your participation today. We're so grateful for your commitment to fair housing and for being here. And also, if you would all give them a round of applause. We're going to move to the second part of our keynote address is what we're moving to. Dr. Russell Smith from Winston-Salem State University will come and provide us some great information. We're looking forward to his conversation today.
Give me 1 second to set up.
While we are waiting for Dr. Smith to set up. I guess I'll talk about him a little bit. Dr. Smith is a professor of geography in the Department of History, Politics, and Social Justice, as well as the founder, faculty lead for the Spatial Justice Studio at the Center for Design Innovation. His research interests include exploring issues of spatial injustice related to the built environment and local government boundary change. He's authored numerous research publications, contractor reports, scholarly and community presentations, and a book titled Municipal Incorporation Activity in the United States, Patterns, People, and Procedures. So looking forward to what we're about to hear.
Thank you very much. Just trying to pull the presentation up here. Oh, there we go. Great. All right. So yeah, thanks again. Appreciate it. Appreciate the conversation with the panel and the few minutes I have to share a little bit about some of the work that we're beginning here in the community. Give a little background. Maybe show of hands. How many people have heard of spatial justice? Oh, great. Yeah. 6 years ago when we founded the studio, I could find no one, including myself. I wasn't even familiar with the concept. And then I read a book by a geographer, well-known geographer at UCLA called Seeking Spatial Justice. And coming from a background in planning, a lot of the things he was talking about made sense to me. And then I used it as a way to try to connect to the students that I have in my classes at WSSU, because when I talk to them about annexation and subdivision ordinances and zoning requirements, they thought that was boring, which a lot of it is. But when I started talking about spatial justice or spatial injustice, it really piqued their interest. They were really interested in hearing more about, well, what does that mean? And they identified with the idea of many of the issues of gentrification and spatial ramifications in terms of how food deserts, transit deserts, these different geographies impacted their lives. And so we've been able to develop a studio in which we're exploring these things locally. Some products that we've developed in conjunction with the county include the Neighborhood Opportunity Atlas, which you're welcome to go online and check out. That provides a really good spatial analysis of conditions by census tract here in our county. And now we're tackling another project. It kind of comes on the heels of the Undesign the Red Line, which we participated in, and it showed the impact of what the HOLIC, the Homeowners Loan Corporation program, had here in Winston-Salem in terms of the redlining maps that were created. This next project, which I'm going to introduce, picks up kind of where that program ends with the discussion around deed restrictions and racial covenants. So I know I only have a few minutes. I'm keeping everybody away from the rest of their day, so I won't belabor the point. I won't be a true professor and just sit up here for hours and talk. But if you're familiar with this concept, spatial justice is the studio is purpose is to create partnerships, right? It's not just WSSU. We have connections with UNCSA, with Wake Forest, with many numerous organizations in the community that we like to partner with to think about how spaces come about and how space is used. All the issues that we were talking about today have a geographic component to them. Geography matters, and I'm not just saying that as a professor of geography. Location matters, the realtors, right? Location, location, location. Some spaces are privileged and some are placed in disadvantages. And some of that is because of the actual physical geography, and some of it is because of the social manifestations that we put on top of that geography, right? Having a water or sewer line come to your property could be a windfall. Being next to a creek that floods all the time might be a real problem in terms of development and the pressures associated with it. So we're trying to bring about new decisions, new ways of thinking. Some of the things I always talk about is that, many of the problems this community and communities around the country have been faced for 60, 70 years. And maybe it's time to think differently about the solutions, about what we're trying to do, and not just redo the same thing year after year to tackle food insecurity, to tackle poverty, to tackle housing. Maybe it's time to think differently. And I don't have all the answers. I just want to start maybe asking different questions as opposed to the standard thing we continue to ask year after year, maybe even fund year after year. So a definition, because often my students ask me, well, you keep saying this word, what does it mean? Can you give me a definition? This comes from a colleague of mine in the Netherlands. And he says spatial justice refers to the general access to public goods, basic services, cultural goods, economic opportunity, healthy environments, and we create those situations by fair planning, by inclusionary design principles, by connecting with community. As I mentioned earlier, spatial injustice comes about through kind of a couple different things. There is the physical geography, right? Some land is high and some is low, and some has better soils and some is rockier. But then this manifestation of our social, our economic, our political, the things we put on top of that land can really raise up some areas, some neighborhoods, some properties, and really, be detrimental to others. And I think thinking about it that way and not just saying, oh, well, that's too bad, but that actually we're putting, as a society, pressures, some good, some bad, on different geographies, is the first step in understanding why those differences exist. Right? There's just a physical component. Okay, that's fine. I can take that my land is hilly or it's flat or whatever. But when it's zoned a certain way, when it's given access to things or not given access, or when it's put next to, all of a sudden I have locally unwanted land use right in my backyard. Well, that's a decision that the social world put on top of my individual geography. What can we do to create more just spaces? Well, I think you have to acknowledge that some degree of inequality is going to exist across the board. Like that's the reality. But when do we intervene? When do we say these spatial injustices are such to a point that we need to step in and do something about a food desert? We need to do something about health, the lack of health care in a community, about a poor performing school, about these different things that have very geographic relations to them. Economic mobility, another prime example that this community's talked a lot about over the years with my colleague Craig Richardson. So understanding this physical geography and the kind of the friction between that and social geography is a beginning to thinking about spatial justice, getting to this idea of more just spaces, more sustainable spaces. As it relates to housing, I think we have to acknowledge kind of what has happened historically to create unequal housing opportunities across not only Winston-Salem, but across the country, right? We're not trying to pick just on Winston. These things that we're mentioning here has happened in numerous places and spaces, from racialized zoning ordinances, to the redlining, to who received federally backed mortgages, to the subdivision guidelines that the federal government promulgated, to public housing, to deed restrictions. The list goes on and on. Those things divided, those things created spaces that were privileged, spaces that were disadvantaged. And once we do that, maybe we can begin having some of the conversations about how do we move forward, how do we address these things, are there reparative mechanisms by which to move forward and have more affordable, more fair housing, more of a level playing field across geographies that are maybe not that different than we think. So to do that, I'm introducing a project with colleagues. I've got my co-lead in the audience here, Dr. Cynthia Villagomez from WSSU, and she's helping co-sponsor this project. I'm going to show you a slide of all the partners to date. What this is a call for help. We want you as an individual, we want you as your organization, as a part of the community, to participate on what I'm going to describe, and there'll be an opportunity at the end to show you how you can connect. But we're introducing a project called Mapping Prejudice, and what we're looking to do is actually analyze every deed that's at the Register of Deeds office in Forsyth County from 1900 to 1970. That's going to be using an AI system and some computer science techniques in conjunction with the University of Minnesota, who kind of modeled this and has been doing it around the country. And this project is going to seek to understand the geographic ramifications of deed restrictions and racial covenants. Those things that were put on properties during the 1910s, 20s, 30s, 40s, potentially into the 50s and even 60s, that prohibited certain groups from occupying certain spaces in the county. You couldn't live in this community unless you were of Caucasian race. You were excluded from this neighborhood if you were African American, Hispanic, Asian, whatever it might be. So we're going to begin shining light on these injustices to understand what are the potential ramifications for the geography of housing today. What does it look like? What do those spaces that were prevented from being occupied, how does that impact where we are today, and have conversations hopefully across the community about what does that mean? How do we move forward? We're right now in our data collection phase. We were just secured from the Register of Deeds a 2 terabyte hard drive with every record from 1900 to 1970, and that will be shortly sent to Minnesota for them to begin the analysis part. After that comes the tough work. The tough work is actually community engagement, because what they're going to do is they're going to be able to upload all of the records that their software deems as potentially having deed restrictions. So sometimes it's blatant as saying no one other than someone of the Caucasian race could occupy this dwelling. Sometimes it'll kick back something that will say the word black, and you got to look at it and say, well, is it preventing someone who's African American or black from living here, or is that property on Black Street? One of those things is a deed restriction, one of those just is a street name. So that's where I said the work comes in, because what we're going to do is we're going to begin hosting in the fall community-wide efforts at schools, across our universities, at anybody that'll have us, to look at all the deeds that get identified. We're thinking we have 1 million records, and we're going to get back something like 100,000 once it weeds out the ones that are not potential deed restrictions. And we have to manually look at those one at a time in groups across the city to make sure it's accurate, to collect information, and to begin to map it. We're also working with Muse and Mike Wakeford at UNCSA to collect stories from the community, to hear about what people's experiences. Do they remember their family trying to buy a house in a neighborhood, or that their parents put a deed restriction on the property so that they couldn't sell it, or the neighborhood they developed? So we want to hear locally from people about their experiences with this type of spatial injustice over time. And then finally, and I'm estimating, what do I have up there? Yeah, 2 years. I think it's going to take a while to go through a lot of records. We're hoping to, nibble away at it bit by bit, and we have some WSSU classes, some Wake Forest, some UNCSA. We're having conversations with the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools about, is there a way to incorporate some of this community-based research into human geography, their AP programs at high schools. So we're trying to really have a broad scope here. At the end of the day, we're using this hopefully to institute some change, some systematic change. Is there a way to have policy change to acknowledge what's happened? Can we use this as a mechanism to springboard and develop funding in neighborhoods that were disadvantaged to help raise up more affordable units, to create land ownership opportunities for people that maybe were not allowed those because of these things that were happening in the community those years ago? And of course, we want to monitor and see what happens over time as a result of this project. The deliverables, we're getting ready to launch a website. I can't share the website with you today, but I'm going to share something where you can be kept in the loop about more information. We're going to collect local stories, as I mentioned. We're also exploring opportunities with Register of Deeds in other counties that are doing this about how can we discharge the deed? How can we maybe remove this from being on the deed but still in the history? So there's some mechanisms by which we can erase it but not really erase it, and it's been tried in some other states. And then the development of a community fund. We spent a lot of money in this community to redevelop downtown. There are neighborhoods in need of redevelopment as well, especially when it comes to affordable housing opportunities. Can we use this as a springboard to have conversations about generating funds that can be used in the community to address these past grievances? No single path, right? There's a lot of different things, and I'm not going to read all of these, but maybe one of these things speaks to you in terms of why you want to get involved in this project. I hope something reaches out to you. Here's some of our partners that we've been working with over the beginning 6 months of this project, trying to raise awareness. I've had a lot of conversations. We're looking for more helpers, volunteers, leaders, anybody and everybody, because this is a big project that's going to take time. And I will say we're doing it like Wake County's in the process of doing this, and I just talked to their team the other day, and they're taking it a little bit different. As opposed to doing it across the community in 2 years, they have 10 people looking at every deed forever. No, I'm just kidding. Because Wake County, think about how many records they have. I mean, I said you're going to just use 10 people. They're like, we have 10 volunteers, and they come in for a couple hours, and I was like, oh, that's one way, right? There's lots of different ways to skin a cat. I don't know why you'd want to skin a cat, but anyway, that's how the expression goes. But here's some of our partners. We'd love for any of you to join us and be a partner with the project as well. It's about the past, but it's also about the future. A lot of people have said to me, well, this is just an academic research project. No, it's more than that. Yes, we're generating a map. Yes, we're going to collect data. We're going to have stories. It's about understanding what's happened in the past that still impacts Winston-Salem neighborhoods today. And I think that's an important piece that we have to understand. And if we can think about that, we can think about alternative realities, alternative visions of the future, and change the outcome and outputs of neighborhoods all around the city. This is where you can request more information. I'm going to leave this up here. You're welcome to scan this QR code as a little form. You can fill it out as an individual. You can fill it out as an organization. We will be in touch and share information with you. One of the models that we'd love to see is different organizations host a night and say, hey, we'll provide dinner. We'll get people there. You come bring this and bring the deeds. And for 2 hours, whoever's there will go through. We'll have a little bit of short history. I'll give a little presentation. I'll just talk for a little bit and then let people actually do the work. You're going to be a researcher. You're going to help contribute to this community-wide effort that's going to be spanning across the entire county. If you have questions, you're welcome to email me. You can call my office. I'm always welcome to, I always welcome the idea of going and talking to different groups. If you want to hear from somebody directly, I can do that as time allows, and I think that's probably my time. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and I'll be hanging around if anybody's got any questions. Thank you so much.
Yes, so we'll bring you back to the podium because I'm sure that people have lots of questions. This is fascinating. I'm going to sign myself up and my organization and my board and everybody else. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Be extracted.
So,
hello? Is there any other type of data that you'll be collecting in regards to this project, such as like redlining, the block busting and staring, targeting like banks, any correlations with, those affiliated with the...
100%. So yeah, so from this project directly, we're going to get the owner of the property, the buyer, what the deed restriction says, the geography of it, and the dates, right? So that is what creates the map for it. But then we already have the redlining data that can be superimposed in that. I don't know how familiar people are with GIS, but that technology is what we're going to use to incorporate different products that have already been collected and layer them within this product that we're outputting. You might imagine, and I've said this to people, I think I could make this map that we're going to make now because it's the opposite of the redlining map. But I think collecting the information, doing the work, collecting personal stories from people, I think is going to be powerful. I mean, what you have to think about is that if I was African American and wanted to buy in a neighborhood that prevented that, and I was forced, and this is in 1935, I was forced to buy in some other neighborhood, the accumulation of generational wealth could be, so large because neighborhood X went up this much, and where I bought went up this much. And that then transfers down the line. So just that one moment in time, and we know there's been a lot of other moments in time that led to these practices, but the one thing that prevented that transaction could have huge ramifications on families' wealth today.
That's right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? I think we have sorry. We'll go.
Are you going to look at, here's a situation I think happened recently.
Okay.
I believe that property on MLK, the property taxes dropped. A lot of people bought up the property. And right during COVID, something that was $500 is now $900,000. So are you going to look at how they've dropped property taxes in the past just so that folks can buy land and then jack up the property taxes after they purchased it?
Not as part of this project, but that is definitely an area ripe for research to understanding the discrepancies. I think we had a little bit of discussion about the role of appraisals, in terms of the value that we put on certain things, like the value of a 2,000 square foot 1980 ranch house in this part of town and a similar product here, and one's worth 400,000 and one's worth 100,000. How can that be? Well, the geography tells us that this other one probably, maybe the school district, the school that it feeds into isn't as well. Maybe there's no grocery stores nearby. Maybe it's far to get to a job. So those geographic, those spatial attributes influence spatial injustice. And I think what we need to do as a community is begin to think about, well, how success shouldn't be people having to move to a better neighborhood. It should be making existing neighborhoods better. I think, did you have a question, ma'am, up front? I can repeat it for you if you don't want to.
The question basically was about research for these areas. So I was looking at, are you all going to be taking sample areas, just like Winston-Salem, Texas? There is a food desert pretty much in that area. We just have to go out of the area sometimes, live in a space
Right.
where we can actually live in space within the food district or the food area. So my question is, when we go into some type of sample areas, we just estimate.
Sure. So the question is, are we like going to be doing smaller subsamples of neighborhoods and the conditions there? And we've done that to some degree as part of that other project. You can go to fcnoa.org for Forsyth County Neighborhood Opportunity Atlas, and it looks at things like which neighborhoods access and how far from parks and medical care and food, and there's 50 different variables, and we're in the process of updating all of those right now as part of year 3 of this project. This project does not do that. But I know there are ongoing discussions about thinking about what are those things, because when people talk about East Winston as this monolith, but there, as you guys know, there's different neighborhoods and different needs in different spaces. It's not just one thing is going to fix everything, right? And so the Neighborhood Opportunity Atlas actually identifies, using some statistical analysis, what is the biggest need by neighborhood. So I would refer you to that, and then I'm happy to have some other conversations if you'd like. But yeah. When I've been at WSSU 15 years, and I was surprised when I came how few options there are for students right around campus. Because I live in Greensboro, compared to A&T, there's so many food, housing. I mean, it's a different environment with, not to compare HBCU to HBCU, but just the geographies are very similar, but then what's available is different. Maybe one last question. I don't want to belabor our afternoon. I said I was going to be short. Oh. I don't know if I should answer this one.
Why not?
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Come on, Russ. We're on the same team, man.
Yeah, oh, good. Oh,
okay, quick question.
It's a softball.
So,
okay, put it
when
up
you
here.
talk about, are you only going to talk to people who had these deeds, who have the deed with this language in it? Or are you going to be talking to people to say, did you ever live in a neighborhood where prices went up and you had to move out? Or did you live somewhere, where developer came in and you were renting, but the developer came in and said, we're going to sell this because we want to build something more expensive and you've got to go? I mean, how about that?
We are hoping to collect all those conversations. The reality is, due to the timing, many of the people that put these restrictions on their properties are no longer with us, right? And maybe even some of the people that were wishing to buy into certain neighborhoods have passed. But we're hoping that family members, there's other ways of trying to collect that oral history. And then also, we're happy to think about what are still the ramifications, to your point, of what's going on today in communities. So, I mean, our hope is, of course, to collect the historical part of it, because that's directly tied. But we know that the legacy continues on even to today. Thank you very much.
Again, thank you, Dr. Russell Smith. That is fascinating information. And again, the QR code is up there if you are interested in getting more information, and then also working with Dr. Smith. I want to take the time to thank you all for being here this morning, this afternoon. April is Fair Housing Month, and the work is so critical and important, and there's still so much more to do. We have an expert group of panelists. I want to thank you again for your time and for your expertise. We want to thank the New Horizons Fair Housing Committee for their work in putting together the Housing Summit this year. Thank you. We also want to thank our elected officials for being here for this important work today. And most importantly, we'll see you next year, April 2025. Same place, same station. Maybe different people, but we'll be here. So thank you all. Have a great afternoon.